Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for listening and viewing my videos. I just decided to make an impromptu video of a verse that is quoted by many, and yet I don't think they're understanding it well. And that particular verse is found in James chapter 2 verse 10, which reads, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all." And those who interpret this in an erroneous way, thinks that the law is it's hard to keep, because who's going to keep the 613 law of Moses? If you break one of these little laws, then you have broken the whole law. So nobody's able to keep the law. But this passage here in James chapter 2 is not talking about the 613 law of Moses. He's simply talking about the law of Christ. And I just want to point that out. And keeping the law of Christ is one commandment. It is one commandment that says, love thyself, love your neighbor as thyself. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. What are they? Or what is the commandment? The commandment is love one another as I have loved you. So I just want to point that out. So let's go to verse 8. If we read the whole context, you'll understand better what he's talking about here. Verse 8 starts, it reads like this: "If ye fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, ye do well." Now, what is the royal law? The royal law is the law of Christ, as also known as the law of liberty, also known as the Holy Commandment. So when you read this, you got to have the context in mind. It starts by saying, if ye fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, ye do well. Verse 9, "But if ye have respect to persons, ye commit sin, and are convinced of the law as transgressors." So if you're partial to anybody, partial to the rich, and then discriminate the poor, then you are committing a sin. You should have no respect of persons. Okay, let's go to verse 10. "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all." Meaning that if you break any of the law, you are breaking the commandment, which is love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, let's go to now verse 11. "For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law." So whether you commit adultery, you have broken that commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself. Because if you love your neighbor, you would not commit adultery. And also, if you love your neighbor, you would not kill. Okay, you have broken, once again, the only commandment, the commandment given to us by Jesus Christ: love one another as I've loved you. So let's go to verse 12. "So speak ye, and so do, as they that shall be judged by the law of liberty." What is the law of liberty? The law of liberty is the law of Christ, once again. So he's talking about the law of Christ. Either you love or you fail to love. Okay, and if you break any of these little commandments about love, you have broken that commandment that Jesus gave us to obey. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Let's go to now, having this in mind, let's go to Romans chapter 13, verse 8 to 10, which reads, "Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law." For these thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. So we have one commandment here, which covers a lot of these other commandments. Love covers the multitude of sins. So if you kill, if you steal, do any of these commandments, you break the law, the whole law of Jesus Christ, which is love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, let's verify this by going to Galatians chapter 5, verse 14. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So all the law is fulfilled in one word. So if you break any of these laws that breaks the commandment of love thy neighbor as thyself, you are breaking the law, no matter what it is that you're doing. So that's what James is talking about. Not that we cannot keep the commandments. We should not use that as an excuse to not to keep the commandment. That is not what James is talking about. This verse over here, verse 10, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point is guilty of all. Guilty of what? Guilty of breaking the commandment that Jesus Christ gave us. Love thy neighbor as thyself, or love one another as I've loved you. That is the commandment that we need to keep, not the whole law of Moses. Okay, that's the old covenant. The new covenant, under the new covenant, we have that commandment that Jesus gave to us. So I just want to make that point, that the Christians are not under the law of Moses, but we are under the law of Christ. Thank you for listening once again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.